A Spark of Hope in Sedona's Red Rocks. Written by Amanda Forry Fino. Narrated by Derry. Preface. Dear Cora, how are you doing? I've missed you and all our friends on the Isle of Crete so much. I long to hear the sound of the Aegean Sea at night again. I also miss the smell of Miss Jenkins' bakery and the warm smiles we received as we ran around town. I wonder if the boys are behaving like gentlemen over on the base. But most of all, I miss my father. How is your mother getting along? I'll bet she misses father too. I just wish they'd had more time together before his death. I can hardly believe that he has been gone 3 months. It's still hard for me to face his passing. Before I forget, tell your mother thank you for everything she did for me during that awful week. As you know, I went to Sedona, Arizona, to live with my Aunt Blanche, who is my late mother's sister, and her husband Dean. Aunt Blanche was the one who always sent me letters. She works as a hotel booking agent. Aunt Blanche and Uncle Dean live in a little house in the middle of Sedona. After I said goodbye to you, Marshal Brill, my father's boss, drove me to the airport and helped me get on the airplane and wished me luck with my new life. It was a long flight to Sedona. The whole way I was both nervous about and looking forward to living with my Aunt Blanche and Uncle Dean. I remember my father once told me that my aunt and uncle lost a 5-year-old daughter named Bethany. When I first saw Sedona, it took my breath away. It was winter time, and the most beautiful snow-dusted big red rocks were everywhere I looked. Then I got off the plane and saw my Aunt Blanche waiting for me with open arms. I walked up to her and she gave me a big hug and a kiss. Within seconds, I loved her more than I ever thought I would. After that, Aunt Blanche showed me around Sedona, and I fell in love. My new home was in Chapel Hills. I thought I would love it here. Getting to know Aunt Blanche and starting a new chapter in my life. But I was very mistaken. Later that night, I met my Uncle Dean. To make a long story short, Uncle Dean is a vicious alcoholic who doesn't like me. He makes life miserable, and I cry myself to sleep every night. I also feel bad for Aunt Blanche. Nightly, Uncle Dean hurts her or breaks something of hers in a drunken rage. Aunt Blanche always apologizes to Uncle Dean, but she should have warned me before I came. At school, I'm the new kid on the block, and a girl named Cassie has singled me out to be bullied. We started out well, then she turned on me for no reason. And as the queen bee here, she has turned everyone else against me. She's the teacher's pet to Miss Patello, who always takes her side in any disagreement. Thankfully, I have Aunt Blanche, who is the best thing about living in Sedona. I think that Aunt Blanche is really happy to have me living with her. On my 15th birthday, Aunt Blanche and I played hooky and were tourists for the day. She also gave me a volunteer job on Saturdays at the library to keep me busy. Say hello to everyone for me and put your toes in the sea for me, too. Love, Kimberly Aldridge. One. Kimberly, I don't know what to tell you, but I'm very sorry that Uncle Dean broke your father's award. He was always envious of your father, Blanche said to her niece Kimberly. It was a rainy day in mid-March, and they sat in the car in front of the library. It was very special to me. The award was posthumous, and Father never even saw it, Kimberly said, holding back tears as she took another bite of her hamburger. Rain continued to pound on the car's windows. Kimberly put a hand through her brown hair to sweep it out of her blue eyes. I know, baby. He had no right to do that. He was drunk, and I promise he will never do anything like that again. Blanche said in her soft voice. Kimberly looked into her green eyes. She thought her aunt was gorgeous at age 42 with her long, flowing red hair. Today, she wore a pair of jeans with a jeans jacket. At age 15, Kimberly was old enough to know that her aunt was enabling her uncle to get away with his abusive behavior, and she felt it was time to speak out. "You always defend and excuse him. Over the past 2 weeks, Uncle Dean not only broke a lot of your possessions, but he has hurt both of us. This cannot continue this way." Kimberly had been waiting to say this to her aunt for a long time. "I have my reasons for staying with your Uncle Dean," Blanche said. "Why? It's not like you were raising a child. There's no love or romance whatsoever. He comes home late, drunk as a skunk. Mom was worried about you, too." "It's not like you think it is," Blanche said calmly to Kimberly. Kimberly just stared. She could not believe that her aunt would continue to suffer like this for no good reason. This was not the woman her father had made Aunt Blanche out to be. "I'm sorry, Aunt Blanche, if I hurt you. It's just sad to see you abused by a man like him," Kimberly commented and finished her lunch. Her aunt started to defend her husband, then sighed and gave up. Kimberly was incredibly angry with Uncle Dean for breaking her late father's award for a lifetime of service to the Army. Kimberly looked out the car window as it continued to rain cats and dogs. There were barely any cars in the library parking lot. Kimberly looked at her watch and placed her unfinished food in a bag. "Well, Aunt Blanche, I'll see you at 4 p.m. I love you," Kimberly said as she undid her seatbelt, kissed her aunt's cheek, and hugged her. "Have a great day, and I love you too, Kimberly," Blanche said, forgiving Kimberly for her accurate comments and kissing her forehead. "Bye," Kimberly told her aunt as she got out of the car. "Bye, Kimberly," Blanche replied to her. Kimberly watched her aunt drive away and walked into the library. On Saturdays, she volunteered her time at the library doing whatever chores were necessary. Kimberly liked being there because it allowed her to escape from her uncle who was home drinking. She also loved the musty smell of the old books on the shelves. "Hello, Kimberly. I have a lot for you today," Miss Jensen, the librarian, told her with a warm smile when she saw Kimberly come in from the rain. "Hello, Miss Jensen. How are you?" Kimberly asked as she followed her into the back room. "I'm fine. How was your week?" "Nothing special. I had a test I hoped that I passed," Kimberly told her. "Knowing you, you will pass. Now today, Kimberly, I need you to put the CDs away, and after that I need you to stamp the new books. Can you do that for me?" Miss Jensen asked Kimberly. "Sure, no problem, Miss Jensen," Kimberly said happily to her boss. "Great. If you need me for something, I'll be back at the front desk," Miss Jensen said as she walked away, leaving Kimberly for her work. Kimberly put the CDs in order so that all the different types of music were sorted and lined up together on the cart. It made it easy to find the country, pop, new wave, R&B, and classical music all in one place. She soon came across a CD of her father's all-time favorite band that made her want to cry. But she stopped herself and placed the CD out of sight. A tear still escaped her smarting eyes. Kimberly hated her life in Sedona, coping with the uncertainty of what her drunk uncle could do at any moment. And her experience at school was no better. She wanted to run back to Crete and live with her friend Cora and Helen, Cora's mother. There she could pretend that her father was away on a long mission. But she couldn't abandon her dear Aunt Blanche. While her mind wandered, Kimberly relived the day her father died. It was a cold winter day. Kimberly was outside in her school's courtyard having fun and hanging out with Cora. They were talking about the wedding their parents were planning for the summer. Kimberly was looking forward to having Cora as a stepsister and Cora's mother as her stepmother. "Is any of your family coming to the wedding?" Cora asked Kimberly. "No, Aunt Blanche and Uncle Dean have to work. and they are my only surviving family. My father was an only child, and both of his parents, my grandparents, passed away a long time ago along with my mother's parents. Don't worry, Kimberly. I have a very big family that you will soon be a part of, Cora said happily. Thanks, Cora, Kimberly said at the thought of being part of a family. Kimberly and her father had been alone for a decade by then. A few minutes later, one of her teachers asked Kimberly to come with her. Kimberly was unaware that anything was wrong until she saw Marshal Brill in the principal's office. Kimberly, you need to sit down. There has been a terrible, terrible accident, Marshal Brill said sadly. What happened? Kimberly asked, not realizing that her world was about to change forever. There was an accident, and a number of people died, he said, trying to break the news as gently as possible. Suddenly, she understood, and the floor dropped out from beneath her. Kimberly pulled herself out of the daytime nightmare and back to the present. An hour later, the rain stopped pounding on the library roof as Kimberly sat in the very back stamping books. Today, she was stamping books from sci-fi to romance and everything in between. One minute, it was a boring book of case law, and the next a haunting mystery. Even the non-fiction books could reveal another world to the reader. That's why Kimberly loved stamping books. It exposed her to so many different subjects. Whoever wrote this is a quack, Kimberly commented out loud after she saw a book on how to live a dream life written by a psychologist. Tell me about it, came a girl's voice from the other side of a tall desk. The suddenness of it scared Kimberly. Who's there? Kimberly asked. Just a girl who was bored out of her mind stamping books. Tell me, whoever you are, how many books does this library need on relationships, or how to get your dream woman? The voice asked Kimberly. Don't know, but I'll bet they have about 200 books on the subject, Kimberly replied as she heard someone move on the other side. I like you. Tell me, do you have a name or do I have to make one up for you? Said the voice. It's Kimberly, she said shyly. Just then a girl appeared and leaned on the desk. The girl was nicely dressed with beautiful long dark blonde hair cascading down her back. She had the most amazing blue eyes that Kimberly had ever seen. Kimberly suddenly realized that this was the class troublemaker from some of her classes at school. Well, Kimberly, what's your story? The girl asked. My story? Kimberly said, shocked that the girl would ask. I've seen you moping around here and at school for weeks now, the girl said, as she played with her hands. It's long and complicated, Kimberly told her. I have time to waste. The girl stared at Kimberly. Kimberly looked down at a book on the table before her. She was uncomfortable and had always found it hard to speak to strangers. Yet suddenly, in front of this odd girl, it came rushing out like someone had turned on the water tap. Mother died of cancer when I was 3, and my father was a general, so I was an army brat who moved from station to station. Once, years ago, we moved to the Greek Isle of Crete, and while there, I made friends with a girl named Cora. Her mother and my father fell in love and were set to marry until my father was killed in an explosion during an army test. As for me, I came here to live with my beloved aunt, who is married to a drunken devil who puts us through hell every night and especially hates me for taking over the room that belonged to his deceased daughter. My aunt refuses to stand up to him, and my new school is the school from hell, too. Wow, which is overly complicated, makes my life a piece of cake. Not to be rude, the girl said. Thanks, Kimberly said, relieved that she had someone her own age to whom she could confide her life story. She found she liked this girl. So what's your story? Kimberly asked. Better not start that one. Let's save it for another rainy day, the girl said as she smiled at Kimberly. It's Lexy, right? Kimberly asked her, remembering her name from rumors by the other students. That's my name. Don't wear it out. All right, Lexy, then, why do you do all those pranks at school? Kimberly was surprised to be befriending this girl. Her father, if he were alive, would never have allowed her to associate with a troublemaker. It's true that I play funny pranks at school, but that makes me a bad girl, doesn't it? I hate my classmates, and I'm sure that you know what I mean. Kimberly reconsidered her. She couldn't really blame her for the pranks on her classmates, since the latter were rude. Let me guess, you enjoy playing pranks on Cassie and her followers. You can say that again. And she looked the other way. Let's just say me and Cassie go a long way back. Her daddy owns a winery in Page Spring, which makes her popular at our school. It makes me want to throw up just thinking about it, Lexy exclaimed. Cassie tried to make friends with me on my first day at school, and the next thing I know, she had turned the whole school against me. And I don't know what I did. That's Cassie for you. I bet the reason why she did that to you was that you are not rich enough for her liking. We hated each other since the moment we laid eyes on each other. What do you think about our teacher, Miss Patella? Kimberly asked her, wanting to know her thoughts on the most evil teacher that she ever had. Miss Patella is a real bat and always takes little Miss Cassie's side. I had her as my teacher last year as well. I know that Miss Patella doesn't like you one bit. What did you do to end up on her denied list? Beats me. I figure Cassie made up a rumor to tell her about me, then passed it on to the rest of the school, Kimberly said, hearing someone approach. She turned around and saw Miss Jensen walk toward them. I thought I heard you two talking back here, Miss Jensen said to them. Your ride is here, Lexy. Did you finish all the books that I put out for you? Miss Jensen inquired, eyeing Lexy. Yes, Miss Jensen, and I cleaned my desk up, the girl said, slight sarcasm marring her otherwise respectful tone. Okay, then I will expect you back here next week, Miss Jensen said to her, putting her hands on her hips and raising an eyebrow. But of course, Miss Jensen. Where else would I possibly wish to be but here amongst the countless dusty volumes? Lexy replied, wearing an innocent expression while she tried to hide her grin. She then gave Miss Jensen a left-handed salute while her right hand searched for her bag on the other side of the desk. Miss Jensen fumed silently, eyes bulging at the blatant display of disrespect. Muttering to herself about spoiled rich kids, she stomped away back to the front desk. As soon as she was out of sight, Lexy burst out in laughter. Kimberly herself could not stop the giggle that escaped her mouth. Still chuckling, Lexy secured her bag on her shoulder and turned to face Kimberly, grin still evident upon her face. Kimberly's eyes narrowed slightly. You shouldn't be so rude to Miss Jensen. She's an exceedingly kind woman. Probably the nicest working here, Kimberly scolded. Grin still plastered on her face. Lexy said, I know, but that just makes it more fun to get a rise from her. Kimberly rolled her eyes. Do you always act like this? Lexy thought for a moment. Well, not when I'm asleep. Does that count? They both looked at each other, then burst out laughing. I think this is the start of a beautiful friendship. I'm fairly sure I'll be seeing you at school. I wouldn't want to disappoint anybody, would I? She asked innocently. Until then, take no crap from anyone this weekend. Shall do, Kimberly said, watching Lexy's face turned mischievous, winking as she turned to the door, dark hair swinging around her shoulders as she disappeared beyond the bookshelves. Kimberly returned to work stamping books. A little while later, Miss Jensen came back, still muttering to herself as she passed Kimberly. She picked up a book from Lexy's desk. Miss Jensen turned back around and looked right at Kimberly. For a year now, Lexy hasn't ever talked to anyone but me, Miss Jensen said. I guess that she was bored and wanted someone to talk to. Why is it important? Kimberly asked. She didn't know where this conversation was heading. Do you know who Lexy is? Miss Jensen asked, watching Kimberly. No. Kimberly replied. "She's Lexy Heller, the only daughter of the billionaire George Heller.